Welcome to the 10th Annual Archives and Genealogy Day. I'm Kayla Barrett, Deputy Director of the Georgia Archives, and we are so glad to see you, everyone in person here today. We have an interesting and informative and maybe even exciting program for you here today. Before we begin, I do have a few housekeeping details to go over. There is coffee and hot water for tea and bottled water in the hallway to your back of the classroom here. The rest rooms are also off the side hall here. If you turn to your left, you'll see them. We will have 15-minute breaks between each session. Lunch will be from 11:45 to 12:45, and we will be serving pizza in the lobby for a donation to the Friends of Georgia Archives and History. You are welcome to leave the building for lunch. But please take a moment to stop by the tables for the Afro-American History and Genealogical Society and the Georgia Genealogical Society in the lobby. Now, to allow all staff to eat lunch, the reference room library will be closed and locked from 12 to 1, which is our normal closing hours, in keeping with our normal hours. We invite you to use the reference library after the program ends from 3 to 4. And if you do not have a registration card, you can register at the welcome desk during lunch. Our first session this morning is Railroad Retirement Board Pension Files at the National Archives at Atlanta, presented by Maureen Hill. Maureen is an archivist at the National Archives starting in 2006. She holds a Master's of Library Science degree from Valdosta State University. Maureen has presented on various records at the National Archives, including the Tennessee Valley Authority, the Civilian Conservation Corps, the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary, and the Railroad Retirement Board. Maureen?
Good morning. There we go. No, it didn't do it. Let me go back. Sorry, I'll get this together. There. How's that? All right, there we go. We're up and running now. I am Maureen Hill. I work next door at the National Archives in Atlanta, and I recognize some of you. Is anyone else, who else been to the National Archives next door? Recognize several of you. We opened back up after the terrible pandemic, and we opened back up in March. Opened up our textual research room, so original documents only. Our computer room that had like Ancestry.com and some other websites is not open yet to the public. We hope that it will get open. It's just logistics have been a lot with the National Archives trying to coordinate facilities all across the country, and they're trying to get open all at the same time in the same hours and that kind of thing. So if you wanted to make an appointment, you just need to send an email and let us know what original records you want to look at. And then we have lots of appointments. I don't know if many of you have been since we reconfigured our research room, but our textual research room is huge. Like we can fit easily 15, 20 people. So we don't have any problem getting reservations for you at this time. So we're good to go. Does anyone have questions about, I know I haven't been talking out in public in a while. Does anyone have questions about the National Archives before I start, about us opening or what we need? No? Yes. We have just records next door. We just have records for the Southeast states. Yes, yes. The National Archives in general, we have regional facilities, and they also have the ones in DC and Maryland. So, all right. So I'm going to talk about the Railroad Retirement Board records. Prior to the start of the Railroad records, which was in 1936, is when the records start. Individual railroads would have their own little pension systems, but they weren't great. And as it says, the Depression just drove the railroad pension system into a state of crisis. So the government came in, this is during the New Deal, And they had already set up Social Security, but they decided to set up a railroad retirement board as well. They had legal issues. So it was 1936 before any payments were made out on the Railroad Retirement Board pension files. So they were created, the railroad, I say 1935 here, that's when they were all getting together, even though they didn't make payments until 1936. But it was for retirees, it was for survivors and retirees. They eventually added unemployment records, and disability. Disability was covered under the Railroad Retirement Board as well. All right, next. Sorry, that doesn't want to scroll. This is just a basic timeline. The railroad benefits started with limited disability. They added unemployment, survivor, sickness, disability benefits. Spousal benefits were added in the 50s. Medicare benefits were added, and then what they say is the introduction to two-tier benefit system. Basically, you could get Social Security. They would have the same amount as you would receive Social Security, and the second tier was like an extra benefit. So I read somewhere there was about, you make 25% more from the railroad retirement pension files than if you collected Social Security. For railroads, in order to get the railroad pensions, you needed to work at least, and I'm looking at this, 10 years. If you worked less than 10 years with the railroad, they would switch those credits over to Social Security. So you wouldn't get both. It would be one or the other. And after 1995, you only have to serve 5 years. One thing I do want to mention, I mean, probably go down the next slide for that. These are pension files. They are not employment files. A lot of people want to know, like, what did my dad, my grandfather do specifically as part of their employment? This is not, this is pension. So it's just like Social Security, but it's through the railroad. At the National Archives, we have about 56,000 cubic feet of records. So it's over 1.5 million individual files, going up to 2,000. We received those records in 2010, and in 2010, the files had to have been retired at least 7 years at that time. So if you have someone that passed away in like 2005, we're not going to have their retirement files because they weren't old enough yet. There's some restrictions for medical information and for third-party information. When we received these, oh, I'm sorry, yes. Yes, and that's a good question. So we got these records in 2010. They were in Chicago, and the National Archives in Chicago ran out of room, and we had all this space. And so they're like, well, let's send it all down to Atlanta. And so they did. And now in Atlanta, we're out of room, and we're talking about maybe shipping them back to Chicago, and then Chicago will possibly get the newer records that come in, excuse me. So that nothing will happen before 2024. So they're here for a while. When they shipped them to us, they called it was in storage units. And they shipped us storage units 8 through 20. And the only thing I think is maybe it's like a closet, whatever, storage unit 8 through 20. Storage units 1 through 7 were destroyed before, ages ago. So sometimes you'll say, I know that there should be a file for my ancestor, and we're like, no, it's just not on our database. And that's because it might have been part of that early storage units 1 through 7. Storage units, say 21 to whatever it goes to now, that's what might eventually go to Chicago. If that's what ends up happening, I don't know. It changes all the time. Every time there's a meeting, it's something different. So I don't know. We might just have them forever. We have a database that lists each file that we have. They, if you can see this, we have the last name and then just a first initial. I don't know why that's how they send it to us, but we don't have the first name. So you have an ancestor with a really common name, it's going to be very difficult to find that file if we don't have like a claim number on the left or a social security number. We do have this database available on Ancestry.com and on a website called the Midwest Genealogy Center. They were the first ones to get it up, and then Ancestry got it later. What Ancestry did is pretty cool, is they tied it to their Social Security Death Index. And so you can get, if the Social Security numbers match up, they may have a full name. We actually rely on Ancestry.com's database more than ours. Yes. Yes, I'll let you know. That's what we're going to talk about. Yeah. So I was telling you, this is what the database looks like. It's not helpful to us to find anything by telling us where they worked. It doesn't matter. It's like, we just need this information to find the records. So those claim numbers, let me go back. You can see these ones. I just took a screenshot of the ones that started with an A, but there's also, their range can be arranged by Social Security numbers. If it starts at 700 to 728, those were issued by the Railroad Retirement Board, those Social Security numbers, up till 1963. And then they just stopped issuing numbers that were specific for railroad. So there's a good chance if you have someone that has a Social Security number that starts in those early 700s, there's a good chance that there's a file. There's also these prefixes that if it starts with an A, it's the benefits for the retired employee. D is the survivor annuitant, and H is the widow or widower. I think D and H are kind of interchangeable as far as I can tell in the records, but just if you're curious, like, I wonder why there's a D here, that's what it is. So typical records, before I really go on to this, the files can be anywhere from like 50 pages to 300 pages. We charge 80 cents a page to copy the records. So it can get real pricey. Also, the records in general are great for genealogy. There are gems in there. And so there's some good stuff. Most of it is financial pension records. So they're not real interesting. But so what we do offer is if you wanted 25-page, we call it an abbreviated file, that we'll go through and pick out the genealogy, things that you'd be interested in for genealogy. We'll offer that for $20. So you're not breaking the bank. You can still get filed, get the things that are related to genealogy. Some people are just like, I want everything, which is fine. We'll copy the whole thing. But he did take $200 from you and it's like all pay stubs or, that kind of thing. So I'm going to talk about typical records you're going to find related to genealogy in these files, and what you can find on them. So, and the ones I'm going to show you are in almost all the packages. So there's almost always an application for annuity. And I try to pop it up there. I don't know if to make it a little bit bigger, but you'll find the date and place of birth, the parent's name, and often the mother's maiden name is included on that. So that's a good one. We always, and these are ones that for going through the package, this is what we're looking for to copy for you. You're also welcome to make an appointment and visit and go through it yourself as well. So the statement of service prior to January 1, 1937, they would use prior employment to give you credits for for the Railroad Retirement Board. So that's why you'll always have it'll go back to like 1890, 1900 that you'll see other places that they worked. So the date and place of birth again, parents' names, where they worked, the name of the railroad, and the occupation they had. And this one file is actually like a 4-page. You open up the middle and it kind of shows what earnings they had in certain years. And if there's sometimes on the inside page that they worked at, a really long work history, that'll be included in there as well. So we generally will take all 4 pages of that, we'll copy. An application for spousal annuity, this is a good one because you got the spouse's maiden name, date of birth, parents' names, the spouse's mother's maiden name, and if they had any other prior marriages, that's kind of down at the bottom of that file, the one over there, but good information on there. This is one, so if someone was a student when, say, their father died, they're as long as they were enrolled in school, they could get benefits. So oftentimes, if you think about if the student was in the 1970s, they're still going to be alive. Their Social Security numbers were in there. So you'll see sometimes if there was a statement regarding the student, you'll see redactions in there. The only time that's the main thing we redact, or sometimes there's some medical records if there's someone that might still be alive that will redact. But mainly we're looking at Social Security numbers just to make sure they don't get out in the wild. And then the designation of beneficiary. Again, you're going to get names, maiden names. Here you're going to find some children. If you look in the middle section of that, that would be like secondary beneficiary. So you'll get the names, sometimes their address, their relationship, son, daughter, that kind of thing. And again, employer and the occupation. And we often, not always, but we often find birth certificates in there. So you'll see it's like regular birth certificates. Sometimes it'll be a certificate of baptism. These aren't always in there, but often. And sometimes they just don't have a record, so they just like write it out, my correct age is this, I was born on this day. If there are no records, there are no records. So, you'll see some of the other ones I show you, they'll have like a neighbor say, yeah, I've known them for 30 years, that kind of thing as a verification. Adoption papers, rarely, but every now and then you'll find that. Again, that's kind of a tricky one, like if an adoption is supposed to be sealed and then these records show up in here. I don't know. We don't redact them, but you'll find them sometimes. Again, marriage certificates, we'll find these fairly often. And again, like you'll have like the one in the middle. I just love that paper. So I'm going to do that one. It's got a rabbit on it. But it will say, I've known so-and-so for 30 years and they have these kids, and it's kind of verifying. And to my knowledge, they've never been married to anyone else. So they would take these in lieu of other types of records, like official certificates. Oftentimes you'll find divorce papers. Someone gets remarried and both of the prior spouses want benefits. So you'll find pretty often the divorce papers in there, and correspondence back and forth about it, about who gets the benefits, that kind of thing. And almost always there's a death certificate in there. If there isn't, you often get the statement of death by the funeral director. You'll also be statement of burial expenses in there, and sometimes information about life insurance will be in there as well. Not as much, but definitely the death certificate is almost always there. In lieu of any of these certificates I just showed you, they have this form G91, which is a verification of records, which is basically someone would send in their birth certificate. Someone at the Railway Retirement Board would notate all the information on it and send it back to them. I love the G91s. They just have all the information you need on it in lieu of the actual death certificate or marriage certificate. These are my favorite forms. Do I sound like a bureaucrat? Do we all have favorite forms? But they give all kinds of information. Again, and then this is one of the rare ones that will show if there was military service. So that's a handy one. Also gives like their serial number, where they served, that kind of thing. So G91's your friend. Don't be sad if there's not a birth certificate. You have a G91. There's also a lot of correspondence in there from either the spouses of a deceased pensioner, or from the actual people. Like this one here is E.D. Nixon, who was a civil rights leader. He helped to organize the Montgomery bus boycott. He also led, I'm looking at my notes because I want to get this right. He led the Montgomery branch of the Brotherhood of the Sleeping Car Porters, the Pullman Porters. But he had worked until he was not on the railroad. He retired from the railroad, receiving his pension, and then worked until he was 81. And I'm not sure, I couldn't figure out where he worked, but he was working. And the Railroad Retirement Board started taking his benefits away because he was making other income. And so he was writing it. There's a lot of correspondence with him. It's like, wait a minute, how is this fair? Which I thought was kind of cool. There's lots of information from him in there. Other correspondence, I just like this one because basically, I don't know if you remember, I was saying that if someone was a student, they could get benefits if their parent passed away. Well, this one young lady was a student, and they just weren't giving her money. They were jacking her around. Their last name was like begging to be misspelled. It's like GEALUB, and all the different documents had either 2 L's or an OB, or and the RB was just kind of jerking them around, not giving them money, to the point where the young lady had to drop out of school in order to make money just to live. And then they're like, well, you're not a student, so you're not entitled to the benefits. So anyway, the mom writes this letter, saying, why are you jerking me around like this? And then a little PS the daughter writes in, kind of, let me see if I can see it, but this is ridiculous kind of thing. And then she signs her name. The thing that cracks me up is if you can see right at the bottom, she signed her name and then she squeezed in yours truly. Maybe that was too harsh. Or her mom made her do it. I just kind of think her mom probably is like, oh, you need to soften that up a little bit. But there's things like that in there. They're fun. Let's go to the next one here. At college, at both. So anyone, so under 18, if your parent passed away, you would get a benefit. But if you would get them as up to, I think, 22 if you were enrolled as a student. Yeah. The rest of the file, just so you know, they're not really exciting. This one all the way on the left is the one I think I was saying with the form that inside it kind of gives the amount of money they made certain years. That's kind of cool because also on the right-hand column it says what their job was, occupation. The rest of it is going to be just kind of scribbly little financial records that aren't real exciting. So if you are interested in these, I really suggest you do the $20 genealogy package. But you're, of course, welcome to give us more money if you like. Yes. Correct. For at least 10 years. Yes. Yep. So, and just to put a point on that technically you could get both Social Security and Railroad Retirement Board benefits if you did, if you worked 20 years one place, 20 years another place. But it was more beneficial to take the RRB pension files. So you won't see many cases that someone has both. It's also, if you see that if your ancestor, that they got Social Security, they're not going to have a railroad file. So that's that. And this is kind of short because to order the records, we need the claimant's name, the Social Security number, the claim number, date of birth, and date of death. If you don't have every one of these, it's okay, but if we don't have a Social Security number, we're not going to be able to find it. We can't go by first name, last name, unless it's a very rare, name with 1.5 million files. If you're going to get duplicates or get common names. This is a web address. The two sites, Ancestry.com and the Midwest Genealogy Center, that you can look up to see if there's a file. If you wanted to schedule an appointment or to order copies, you would send an email to us at atlanta.archives@nara.gov. I don't know if you want to email us in. If anyone wants copies of these slides, I'm happy to send them to you, or you have them actually if you want to keep us as well. Oh, yeah, that'd be awesome. So now I'm kind of buzzing through this. Again, we're open Monday through Friday from 9 to 4 by appointment only. And it's, again, just for textual records. Not, our computer room is not open yet. We do have all new computers though, so that makes me think it's going to open. So, I mean, it's hopeful. Like, why are you replacing these if you're not sure? But I believe that it will be open. And lastly, I have to show you this. This map is like my favorite thing in the world. It's from the Library of Congress, but it's a Gospel Temperance Railroad map that they gave out in like the early 1900s, people. But it's like the route, it starts at, let me say, it starts at Decisionville, and then the top route is Repentanceville, Long Suffering, and like the end is Celestial City. But then if you want to go down, you can start at Decisionville, but then you're going to make decisions like Grumblemore, and then there's Societyburg, and you can go north up here. You kind of take a left at Stony Heart, but you can end up at Beer Lake. Or you can go straight on down all the way. You can go, the City of Destruction is the end of the game here. So deciding where you go, you can, if you want, you can probably get back up here, but there's like a rum jug lake there that you can kind of take a little step on. So enjoy the journey. You might want to end up at the top, but yes. Library of Congress. Oh, I have no idea. It's Stony Heart, and it's just a joke. I mean, they were apparently giving out these maps like in the early 1900s to people as like a way to redeem yourself. I'm going to Beer Lake. That's what I have. Do you all have questions? Even if it's not about the railroad records, do you have other questions about what else we might have? Yes.
If a spouse worked in an organization that was not a railroad, how would that person's data relate to this?
For instance, you mean if they are
if a spouse worked for a business,
okay,
and the other spouse worked for the railroads, what relationship would this data have, if at all?
Well, we wouldn't have anything that's not federal government records, and the Railroad Retirement Board is federal government. So if they worked for a business, they might have been getting Social Security, but that would be different. One would get a Social Security check, the other one would get a railroad check.
There's never any blending of
No.
If a spouse worked and did not, they claim spousal benefits.
They could, yeah. And that started, I think, is in 1951 when the spouse could get benefits. Yes.
Go back to the record, because it sounds like in order to get the pension, you have to have any.
No, it's 1936 is when they started paying benefits. Prior to that, the pension would have been through the individual railroad companies.
The relationship is Social Security and Social Security. That Social Security number is on by the railroad board. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, and they were identifying by using the 700, starting with 700 to 728. I think it got a little unwieldy at some point in 1963. They're just like, okay, Social Security, you issue all the numbers, but if they work for the railroad, we'll just use that number that you assigned.
So they would have Social Security. That is not
correct.
that because the federal system, they have.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes. Yes. Any other questions? Yes.
I understand you to say that the plan is to move these.
The plan is to maybe move. It changes all the time, so I should probably getting ahead of myself even saying that, but it's possible that they can move back to Chicago. And then the railroad headquarters is in Chicago, and all their temporary records are up in Chicago already. So it's kind of like blending them back together. So it would make sense to do it, but it's expensive, and they're kind of tight on space as well. So
Probably can't. I've been really. Our records that I had used in the
Mhm.
suddenly are like
Bankruptcy.
bankruptcy.
Yep.
Are suddenly somewhere else.
Yep.
It seems like.
And a follow-up to that I wanted to ask, there does seem to be some series that for the entire country that are at specific regionals.
Right. Yes.
Go into that a little bit.
Sure.
more?
Yep. Well, first, okay, about consolidating, there are some records that they did decide to put everything in one place, and that place is in Kansas City. Main reason being they have, it's called Subtropolis. It's actually kind of cool. It's caves that they have bays inside, archival bays inside these caves. You literally drive into a cave. I've been there once. It's really fun. And it's cheaper to store. It is easier to maintain the environment instead of having, these expensive HVAC systems and stuff like that. It keeps more of a steady temperature and humidity, and it's much, much, much cheaper. So what they were doing is consolidating a lot of the records. The bankruptcy records went there. The Court of Appeals records went there. I'm trying to think what else they're consolidated, but definitely there is a trend to that, to having one. The other thing with the Subtropolis, there's a ton of space. They can just keep going. They can keep building, and it's cheaper. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that. Whether long-term, the ultimate goal is to just have a couple of facilities, I don't know. No one has said that out loud. So, yeah, I can see that. No one just actually said that, and I'll at least finish my career out. I'm good.
Are those in Kansas or Missouri?
Kansas City, Missouri. Yeah.
I mean the underground storage.
Yeah, it's in Kansas City, Missouri, on the Missouri side. Oh, okay, yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. And I'm sorry, I'm following up on your question, but now I forgot it already.
Are there other series, and you may have already addressed this, that are consolidated at other nationals, or is it
Right.
Kansas City?
Kansas City, then military records are in St. Louis, but military records prior to World War I are in Washington, D.C. Then there's, it's so complicated. And then there's like records from World War II that will be in College Park, Maryland. The ones that are kind of seem like they're regionalized will be ones like in Atlanta. We have almost all the CDC records because CDC is in Atlanta. We have all of Tennessee Valley Authority records because they're based in the Southeast. So it can seem like things are consolidated, but it might be because the headquarters is there. Yes, we do. We do have all of them. They will move to St. Louis as well eventually, but not soon. And what they're doing, because you all may have heard in 1973, there was a fire in St. Louis with a lot of records were burned, military records were burned. And so they're trying to like recreate whatever they can of the files that were destroyed. So they're hoping to do that. They would get everything that's, even though draft cards aren't military records, it's military adjacent. They would try to get everything one spot. Like they already have the World War II draft cards in St. Louis. So eventually those will go to St. Louis, but not like in the next few years. Sure. Yes. Federal. So everything we have at the National Archives is federal records only. Yes. Yes. Mhm.
He died in 8, I think.
Mhm.
File.
Oh, yeah, these are the whole country again about being consolidated. We do have it's the whole country. So yes. Yeah. Yeah, sorry, I don't even know if I said that out loud. So I apologize for that. It is we have all of them right now that are archival records. So there should be, depending on when he worked there, you can look it up on that Ancestry website. You can like I go to the card catalog and type in railroad retirement, and then you can just check the database and it pulls up. So, and I'll let you know. Yes.
So using those two websites, so I don't understand why it really matters if the records are here in Atlanta or St. Louis. We have access to the records.
The records are not digitized. This is just to let you know if their file exists. Yeah, it's just an index. Yeah. So these are not digitized. They will never be digitized.
But that also gives you the information to request from the
yeah.
National Archives, the information that you need.
So if you find like, oh yeah, there is a file for this person, email us and we can get you copies.
But I might not be able to actually see it.
Oh, yeah, but you can also make an appointment and come and see it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I can make an appointment and come see it,
Mhm.
and then say, hey, this is me. I want to make.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can have some idea of what's available.
Exactly. Yes. And just to let you know, if you did come in person to see the records, if you brought your own camera or your own scan, or there's no charge, just no auto feed. Yeah, auto feed's bad.
Even if the record's on your plan, if they're in St. Louis, we can still do what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah, it'll be Chicago. But if you want to make a trip to Chicago, you could do that, or you could send them an email. But don't worry about that yet, because it'll be at least 2024, and it changes every couple of months. So, yes.
The fire you referred to in St. Louis,
Mhm.
Was the damaged material or the destroyed material just a time period, or was it generalized across? In other words, do you know what was burned up?
I can give you an idea. It is on our website as well, but it was mainly Army records beginning World War I up to like the 1960s.
You know what year?
Major destruction.
Yeah.
Major loss.
Yes. Yeah. So the years, it would be 1917 to 1960s. Like my father's was burned in the fire. I even thought, I'm going to try it again to see if it really was burned in the fire. And it's still.
I was trying to figure out whether mine was burned up.
Yeah.
That would have been 1970.
I think some of the later ones.
Yeah. I feel like, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it was up to the 1960s records that were burned. You can order them online. It's at www.archives.gov/veterans, and then you can order them online or order paper copies of them as well. Other questions? Okay.
But they are attempting to try to reconstruct some of the information.
Exactly. So that's why they're kind of
How long
pulling.
have they been doing that?
I don't know, 10 years more. It's not easy. I think even at some point people could donate some of the records that they had copies of to make it part of that file, just so they would have something long term. So. Yes. Mm-hmm.
I see my father's name.
Yeah, those cards are at in St. Louis. There are also some, depending on the states, some of them are online. Family Search, I know, did Georgia and maybe Alabama. But the actual physical cards are in St. Louis. So you can get, a copy of the card there. But I would definitely get on, and even Ancestry, obviously, get on Ancestry or on Family Search and see if it's on there as well. Oh, yeah, then that you have to go the next level. So along with the cards, there's a classification list. And that would be like when someone was, thank you, I knew it was rolling around there somewhere. When someone was registered for the draft, they would have to get a physical done. They would have to send a questionnaire was sent to them. They fill it out, and then they could possibly be inducted. Sometimes this classification book will say if they were inducted. Sometimes they don't. It just depends on the county that was doing the selective service, process. So some counties are really good about having a lot of details, and then some counties weren't. The only other way would be to send in a request for the military records and see if it comes up in their search, and as in St. Louis.
Would you even hazard again registered for the romance drafted, giving that they're old men?
I don't think they were. I think they were just getting a sense of the workforce that would be able to be able to help out while the young people went to. That's what my understanding of the old man's draft was.
Okay.
Yeah. So. Any other questions? Thank you. Appreciate you all being here on a Saturday morning before you head out to Bear Lake.